Chapter 3. Ben Carter's Place. The bright April sunshine was also warming Ben Carter as he sat on the veranda of his residence in the woods to the north of the town. The veranda, he called it his cowboy porch, was built on the south side of his house, making an ideal place to sit in his rocking chair and think. He was thinking about the woman whose remains he had dug up 2 months earlier. His house was different, unusual, a shack really. No one knew exactly how long he'd been living there, because his home had always been hidden from view amongst the trees. The land, 4 acres of woodland with the River Gade running through it, belonged to him. The original building was an old RAF hut used as a stable for 2 horses, but over the years he had built a lot of extra living space, workshops and even an artist's studio. A surveyor, should one ever set foot in the place, would have difficulty in deciding what each room was used for, as they all contained products of his inventive brains. The kitchen table was often littered with plumbing bits, spanners and timber, while some of the workshop had kettles, refrigerators, and were well equipped for working lunches. 2 1970s caravans had been attached to the stable to make extra rooms. This was achieved by the simple method of lining up the door of the caravan with a suitable aperture in the main building and nailing the 2 together. One of these annexes was his bedroom, the other he described as the guest room, which had only been used by members of his family on rare occasions. This was not because it was any way unsavoury or ill-equipped. On the contrary, it was warm and clean, with an ensuite toilet and shower, a double bed and 2 bunks in it, unlike his own annex room, which had 1 bed and a wardrobe containing an expensive but ancient suit and 4 shirts. There were piles of clothes on the floor, but if there was anyone there to listen, he would tell them that they were clean clothes and that he knew where everything was, which was absolutely true. The reason there was often no one to listen to him was because he lived alone, having separated from his wife 15 years before. They had 4 children who had been living with his wife until recently, but now she was alone because they had all grown up, left home and married. Each of their children had provided their parents with a grandchild. During the fairly amicable separation, the family home was sold, and Ben bought the 2 acres of woodland without any real intention of living there. As he put it, "It's just sort of happened." For a while he had lived in rented accommodation in the town, but found himself spending more and more time on his patch of land. He made some improvements to the old hut in the form of insulation and a wood-burning stove. Then he saw an advertisement in the local gazette for 4 double-glazed windows and a set of patio doors for £100. Buyer collects. So he bought and collected them and discovered they were different sizes, colours and design, but happily fitted them to his hut in one afternoon with the help of his son, who told him he was mad. "I know, son, I know," he sighed, "but I'm saner than most." He stood back and looked at his building with great fondness and then went inside, deep in thought. He opened one of the windows to speak to his son again. "David," he said quietly, "you'll think that I'm even more crazy now, and I don't want you to tell anyone yet, but I've decided I'm going to live here." "Dad, no!" "No, don't get all disapproving. I've made up my mind. Perhaps it'll change your view if I tell you I can stop paying rent at £800 a month, so you kids can have 200 of that each." There, I thought that might shut you up. This was about the time when he decided to retire from his job as a press photographer. He had earned a lot and spent a lot during his 30 years working for a national newspaper, snap-in as he called it. He had also been prudent enough to invest in a substantial private pension which, 10 years ago, at the age of 50, provided him with enough to live on, and still able to contribute towards the upkeep of his ex-wife and children. His dream was to be a portrait painter, hence the studio attached to his strange residence. It was a beautiful room with a north-facing skylight and 2 enormous plate-glass windows which once adorned the front of a car showroom in the old town. He wasn't very successful. This was not because he wasn't a good painter. On the contrary, his portraits were excellent and delighted everyone, including the sitters and their friends and relatives. The problem was with the artist. He was inclined to ask people if he could paint them, and eventually he would give them his finished work for nothing. Refusing commissions from well-off patrons just because he disliked them was not good business, but he seemed unable, or more likely unwilling, to do anything about it. "You just swan about," his ex-wife would say with great bitterness, "painting beautiful women." They're not all beautiful women. I paint old men and women, and children as well. Mostly beautiful and young women, and then you give the pictures away. That's true. Why can't you take a commission now and again, make some real money? However, his tactics were not entirely without purpose. By now there were a great many portraits on the walls of houses in Hemel, Hempstead, in quite a few other homes in England and around the world. He was building up quite a reputation, and people wanting to commission him were offering more and more money. Eventually, he told his wife, people I actually want to paint will pay me good money. He made many machines. Not all of them original inventions, but all of them used and useful. He secretly diverted part of the river to a dam with a water wheel which provided him with a small amount of electricity which he supplemented with a petrol generator when he needed more. The sloping roofs of 4 hen houses were actually homemade solar panels which supplied him with plenty of free hot water from March to October. On winter days and nights he kept warm with his beloved wood-burning stove, which also gave him hot water for washing, as well as heating 6 old iron radiators, which he had acquired from scrap merchants. However, his most glorious machine was his treadmill. This was made from an old wooden brewer's fermenting vessel, 4 metres in diameter and 10 metres long. It could contain up to 8 people running or walking side by side, and electricity was produced by means of 2 alternators, one on each end of the drum and connected to a bank of lorry batteries to store the power. It also provided enough energy to power a television which hung from wires at a suitable height for those working the treadmill. Ben wouldn't allow a television in the house, and his idea was to discourage his grandchildren from watching rubbish programmes. However, they thought it was wonderful fun and would work the treadmill for hours whilst watching the most appalling programmes. He also loaned it to local fitness and running clubs. He claimed in advertisements that it was a wonderful way to lose weight and get fit, and absolutely free. He did think of charging people for using it, but that he thought would be a bit unfair. Between painting and making machines, he managed to find time for volunteering for local historical and archaeological societies, where he recently became famous as the man who dug up the mystery woman. Now, like many other people in the town, he often found himself trying to think of a rational explanation for her being in the grave. Maybe his sister or cousin took his place, he thought to himself. No, there were so many people who knew Snook and witnessed his trial and execution. No, daft idea. That's the stuff of kids' adventure stories. Perhaps she was actually a highway woman, a bit butch-looking and had a deep voice. I don't suppose we'll ever know, Ben said out loud. He stood up, yawned and stretched his arms, hitting the oil lamp hanging directly above his head. Damn! I'm always bloody doing that, he muttered, rubbing his knuckles. I wonder what the time is. Where's my phone? Nearly 5 o'clock. Susan was going to call me this afternoon. Dozy cow. Hello, Susan, you okay? You sound a bit sleepy. No, don't apologise. I'd almost forgotten as well. It must be the warm weather. Like I said, I'm in no hurry, but do you still want to buy this place?